I raised him for 20 years, only to learn he wasn't my son, but the bond we built is stronger than any DNA test. It was a Wednesday evening when my entire world shattered in a matter of seconds. I remember sitting on the edge of the couch, flipping through the mail like any other day, when I saw it. A letter from the lab, the DNA test I never imagined I'd need, let alone open, was staring back at me with results that would destroy the last 20 years of my life. The words blurred in front of my eyes, but one sentence stood out like a flashing neon sign: 99.9% chance you are not the biological father. How did I get here? How does someone spend 2 decades raising a child, watching him grow from a chubby-cheeked toddler into a man, and not once suspect he wasn't their own? It wasn't an affair or some scandalous family secret I'd been trying to uncover. No, it was worse. It was the truth that had been hiding in plain sight, locked away by the one person I trusted most in the world, my wife. But this wasn't just a story about betrayal. It was the slow unraveling of everything I believed about love, trust, and fatherhood. The day my son was born was the happiest day of my life. I remember holding him in the hospital, feeling a surge of protectiveness I never knew I had. He was so small, so fragile. And in that moment, I made a silent vow to always be there for him, to give him everything I could. I'd never been so certain of anything. My wife and I had been married for a few years by then, and although things weren't perfect, I believed we had built something solid. We had our moments like any couple, but we loved each other, or so I thought. I was naive. Raising a child is a messy, chaotic journey. Sleepless nights, tantrums, scraped knees, birthday parties, homework meltdowns, you name it, we went through it. But through all of it, I never doubted for a second that I was doing what I was meant to do. Every time I looked at my son, I saw a reflection of myself, sometimes in the way he smiled, or the way he furrowed his brow when he was frustrated. It was those small things, the moments when you catch a glimpse of your own mannerisms in your child, that made the hard times easier to bear. By the time he reached his teenage years, things changed a bit. He became more distant, which I chalked up to the usual teenage angst. He still came to me for advice, and we still had our father-son moments, but something felt different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. My wife, of course, brushed it off. He's growing up, she said. He's finding himself. I trusted her. I had no reason not to. The conflict that changed everything started about 6 months ago. My son had been applying to colleges, and we were both thrilled when he got into a prestigious university on a full academic scholarship. But something strange happened when we were preparing his paperwork. My wife, always so organized, became oddly protective of certain documents. There was one night, I remember vividly, when she refused to let me see his birth certificate. She claimed it was misplaced, but the look in her eyes told me something else. That was the first crack in the foundation. I didn't push too hard at first, but over the next few weeks I noticed more things. Small, seemingly insignificant details that didn't add up. Her avoidance, the way she suddenly shut down whenever I brought up anything from the past, and a strange tension that settled over our home. My mind started racing with possibilities, but none of them made sense. Why would she lie? And about what? Then the day came when I received an anonymous message. He's not your son. Ask her about it. My heart dropped into my stomach. I showed my wife the message, expecting her to laugh it off or maybe even get angry, but she didn't. She just stood there, frozen, eyes wide, like a deer caught in headlights. And in that split second I knew. I confronted her that night. The conversation was short, she didn't deny it. Instead, she sat there, silent, as the truth came crashing down around us. 20 years. 20 years of lies. She told me that when we were first married, she'd had an affair, a brief fling, she said, with an old friend. But by the time she found out she was pregnant, she had convinced herself that it didn't matter. I was a good man, a loving man, and I would be a good father. So, she buried the truth deep down, hoping it would never resurface. I can't remember much of what I said after that. I was numb, blinded by a rage I didn't know I had. How could she do this? How could she let me believe, for 2 decades, that the boy I had raised as my own was biologically mine? And why? Why now, after all these years, did it come out? But what shocked me most wasn't her confession. It was my own response. I wasn't angry at my son. No, that anger was reserved entirely for her. He had no part in this, no knowledge of the lie that had shaped his entire existence. He was as much a victim in this as I was. The real twist came a week later, when I decided to get the DNA test done. I don't know why I needed the confirmation. Maybe it was a part of me hoping, somehow, that the anonymous message had been wrong. But when I opened the envelope, the truth hit me like a freight train. There it was, in black and white. He wasn't mine. But here's the thing that no one tells you about fatherhood. It's not just about biology. It's about love. It's about the years of scraped knees, soccer games, late-night talks, and shared memories. It's about the bond that forms when you watch someone grow, not just in height, but in heart. And in that moment, reading those results, I realized something. He was still my son. I had raised him. I had loved him. And no DNA test could ever change that. But my wife? She had broken something that couldn't be fixed. Our marriage was over. There was no coming back from this, not because of the affair, but because of the lie. The lie that had taken 20 years of my life and twisted it into something unrecognizable. We've since filed for divorce. My son, our son, knows the truth now. It was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had, but he took it better than I expected. He told me that I was his father, no matter what, and that no piece of paper could change that. It was bittersweet, really. Here I was, devastated, and yet somehow we found strength in each other. Our relationship isn't perfect, how could it be after everything? But we're working on it, one day at a time. As for my ex-wife, I don't know how she lives with herself. I'm not sure I ever will. If you're wondering how to survive something like this, I wish I had the answer. Maybe you don't. Maybe you just get through it, piece by piece, and hope that, in the end, you can still recognize some part of yourself. What I do know is that fatherhood is more than blood. It's in the moments, the memories, and the love you give. That's something no one can take away from me. And if you want more stories like this, ones that remind you that life is messy, complicated, and sometimes completely unexpected, hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, you're going to want to stick around for the next video.